Hey YouTube, welcome back to my channel. So I've been sampling a lot of stuff lately, and I went on the internet last night to order some more samples, but I thought to myself I should pause and make a video about some of the stuff that I've been working on. So one of the first discovery sets that I bought recently was this Frederic Malle Discovery Set, and I'm going to talk about that today. And it's a set of 12 fragrances. And I don't think they make this one anymore. I think they only have sets of 6. Like there's a masculine discovery set of 6 and a feminine discovery set of 6. And I've actually went on several times to try to buy either one of those, but I think they're always unavailable or sold out. I don't know why. So I got this one on eBay and I actually got it used, but lucky enough, they all had pretty full vials. So if you're interested to hear about my thoughts on the Frederic Malle Discovery Set, stick around. Okay, I also forgot to mention that we're on location today filming in San Francisco, California. I'm on a work trip, so bear with me. But these are the vials. They're actually very cute. Comes in this black box. And I'm going to go through all of these one by one, so I'm not going to read out the names here, but just for your reference, this is what they look like. Okay, so I'm going through these in a fairly random order. The first one is Passant, and this is by Olivia Jacobetti. And this is supposed to be a lilac fragrance. I enjoyed this one. It was one of the more creative in the bunch. It definitely tells a story. It's an aquatic purple flower, springtime sort of thing. It's very cold, and it puts you in the mindset of being inside a house, looking out your window, and there's a cold rain falling, and there's a lilac bush outside your window. It's very romantic, and also probably the overarching theme to this perfume is that it's wistful. So it's a very evocative fragrance. That being said, it wasn't something that I would see myself wearing, although it's extremely well done and beautiful. The opening in particular has this cucumber note, which is, it's very realistic and it's very nice, but it's just not a note that I identify with or want to smell like. And further down into the dry down, there's a wheat note, and something about these two things together, I can't distance them from being a finger sandwich, one of those little cucumber sandwiches with the crust cut off. And I think aquatic fragrances in general for me are just kind of difficult, but this one is really beautiful and worth a sniff if you can find one to test. All right, the next one is Bigarade Concentree, and this is a Jean-Claude Ellena creation. And I found this one to be not that remarkable. I was kind of looking forward to it. I think the notes here are bitter orange and cumin, vetiver, and maybe hay or something like that. And it's a nice fragrance. It reminds me a lot of several other creations by Jean-Claude Ellena, which use this dry vetiver and cumin or other spices. Terre d'Hermès comes to mind, and Cartier's Declaration. And this smells in the same realm as those. I wore it one night and I thought it was pleasant, but it really didn't move me. It's so dry. It's not really very fun to wear, I'd say. But it's an interesting smell, and I could see why some people would like it. Okay, the next one is one of the very famous ones. This is Carnal Flower by Dominique Ropion, and I enjoyed this one. For those who don't know, it's a big tuberose fragrance with eucalyptus and coconut and a bunch of green notes. So what you get here is a very green tuberose. It's quite powerful, bracing, a little mentholated. I think that had I gotten into the fragrance game a long time ago and smelled this when it was released, I would be much more impressed. But my suspicion is that because this perfume has been so influential, and because there's so many things that have come after it that have referenced it, it doesn't really wow me in the way that it gets received online, maybe. One thing that was surprising to me is that it has this very cool, white musk in it that I find in a lot of these perfumes. And it's very, how do I say this? It's a very mature, refined, clean white musk. And it feels almost like a smell that you'd smell in a very high-end hotel spa or something. Almost like so white that it's like blue tinged or violet tinged. I'm not doing a good job describing this, but anyway, I like Carnal Flower. I think it's a great perfume, but it's not one that I need in my collection. All right, next up is Eau de Magnolia by Carlos Benaim, and I enjoyed testing this one. This is pretty much what it says on the tin. It's a magnolia fragrance. In the opening, it's very bright and citrusy with a little kind of indistinct floral note that I guess is the magnolia. I think of magnolia and freesia both as being a fragrance note that reminds me of a lot of fragrances from like the 90s and early aughts. But this fragrance was nice. I wore it on a walk one morning and then went about my day, and I could smell it for a very long time, even though it wasn't very powerful. I think, oddly, as it dried down, I remember thinking that it was much more masculine than I thought it would be. In fact, I think a lot of these Frederic Malle fragrances skew masculine, almost in a way where it feels as though they've intentionally tried to make everything very wearable by men. None of these strike me as being very feminine or girly in a kind of traditional marketing sense, which is a little bit disappointing to me because I really kind of like actually very feminine fragrances sometimes. But anyway, Eau de Magnolia is a competent magnolia fragrance. Okay, camera angle change, I got a phone call. Anyway, the next fragrance is Vetiver Extraordinaire. This one is by Dominic Ropion again. And if I were ranking these fragrances, which I'm not, I would say that this ranked near the bottom of my favorites. It is a pretty straightforward vetiver fragrance, and when I wore it, I enjoyed the opening, which was very clean, green, and fresh. But as it dried down, it got spicier, and to me, it felt a little bit scratchy, almost like amber woody, even though this is not an amber at all. It had like a scratchy woodiness about it. It got very spicy. It again had something that was kind of like in Bigarade Concentree or Cartier Declaration, that like cumin, how do I say this? It reminds me actually of like the smell of one of those plastic seats from like high school that's like pebbly and hard, like after somebody's been sitting in it. Yeah. So I didn't really like this one that much. Okay, the next fragrance here is Une Rose. This one is by Edouard Flechier, who I'm not familiar with. But I didn't actually try this one this time because I have a decant or a 10 ml travel size of Une Rose. And I think I've talked about it on my channel before, but it is a very interesting red rose, plummy, very winey, overwhelmingly kind of a boozy, alcoholic wine rose, and very dark, gothic. It kind of reminds me of something like a rose from the Addams Family, if you can imagine that. Or if you remember the scene in Alice in Wonderland, the cartoon one, where the card kind of warrior things are painting the white roses red. That's what it feels like. It's very like intense and almost psychedelic. It also has lots of strange notes. Like I mentioned the wine thing, it has wine lees. So it almost has like a yeasty feel. There's also castoreum, which is like a leathery animalic note, and truffle. So it's got this like metallic mushroomy note. Very interesting fragrance, very beautiful, but again, not necessarily one that I'd want to wear. The next one is another one of the greatest hits. This is Portrait of a Lady by Dominique Ropion again, and I enjoyed wearing this one. This is another case of feeling like if I had become a fragrance addict many years ago and smelled this for the first time when it came out, I'd be far more impressed by it. That being said, I thought it was lovely. To me, it's almost like a Middle Eastern rose and patchouli fragrance. It's very powerful, very complex. The thing I wasn't expecting is that in the heart notes, after you get over this big, vivacious, beautiful raspberry rose opening, it dries down in the heart to this bouquet, which I find in a lot of these Frederic Malle fragrances, of rose, jasmine, iris, and ylang. And each of these notes is very legible, with a huge dollop of that cool white musk that I was talking about earlier. And that's a very well-defined heart of this fragrance. And one thing I liked about this fragrance was that in addition to it being big and bombastic, the opening lasted for more than an hour on my skin. The heart notes lasted for several hours on my skin. And then the dry down, which I remember as being sort of a woody, patchouli kind of base with amber, that lasted for a whole 24 hours on my skin. The one thing I would say is that I didn't like about it is that the next day when I woke up wearing this fragrance, I found what remained on my skin to be very scratchy and kind of annoying in the way that big perfumes tend to be. So it almost smelled like the far dry down almost smelled like you had gone out drinking the night before and you woke up the next day and your skin still smelled like not only your perfume, but like the various perfumes of the people you had been with, and like alcohol, a little bit messy, but a very beautiful and at this point, a classic perfume. Okay, the next one is French Lover by Pierre Bourdon. And I think this one gets a fair amount of love. And I think it was also called at one point Bois d'Orage or Stormwood in French. But for whatever reason in the USA, it's marketed as French Lover. This is a very green scent. And I think there's like all the green notes, Angelica and Vetiver and a bunch of other things. This was the first one from the set that I sampled actually, and I really wasn't that impressed. It was again a very masculine leaning green fragrance. Again, a little scratchy. In the far dry down, many of these felt a little bit annoying and kind of droning on my skin. This one, it smelled nice, like there's nothing wrong with it. It's just that it is very dry, very masculine, and not a lot of fun to wear. So alongside Vetiver Extraordinaire, I'd probably rank this one toward the bottom. Ooh, okay, so now for my favorite of the whole bunch. This one is Iris Poudre by Pierre Bourdon again. And I really loved this one to the extent that I've thought several times in recent weeks about buying a bottle, because they can be had for fairly cheap now. This is an iris fragrance, as the name suggests, but I wouldn't actually say that it's all that powdery. It is a violet and iris fragrance in the opening with just a ton of notes in a very kind of old school fragrance way. I definitely get a ton of florals, rose, ylang, iris in particular. And in the opening, it's very aldehydic and classic smelling while also being very cold. But in the heart, it warms up, it becomes much more floral and becomes woodier. And I actually don't remember all that much about the base at the moment, but I remember that it lasted forever. Maybe it got a little bit leathery at some point, a little bit fruity somewhere in the heart notes. I just thought it was a fantastic perfume. And again, if you were looking at the notes, you would think that it skewed very feminine. But to me, and again, I have a high tolerance for feminine notes, this was a very unisex perfume. I also like that it was a very different treatment of iris as compared to many things that are out on the market these days. I find that there's a lot of perfumes that have iris in the name or in the notes that skew in this Dior Homme, Bois d'Argent kind of direction, which I would describe as being kind of like a metrosexual iris. This is more unabashedly a classic sort of iris flower smell, and I really enjoyed it. I think as I talk about it right now, I'm convincing myself to buy one of those cheap bottles. But anyway, Iris Poudre, that was my favorite. Okay, the last one I'm going to talk about in depth today is Maurice Roussel's Musc Ravageur, which is also one of the famous ones from this line. And I was excited to try this one because I have, also from Maurice Roussel, Labdanum 18, which is frequently compared to Musc Ravageur. And Musc Ravageur is famously supposed to be this ambery, semi-gourmand musk fragrance. I didn't really enjoy wearing this one, although I see the appeal. It is, again, one of these things where I feel like so many fragrances have been influenced by Musc Ravageur that for me, smelling it so late in my fragrance journey, it feels a little bit like deja vu. And I'd say it also ticks a lot of boxes that are like no-nos for me personally when it comes to fragrance. I find it very sweet. It has a lot of cinnamon and clove, and especially in the opening, it has this kind of baked good or pastry feel. In the heart notes, again, I get that kind of Frederic Malle floral bouquet with some white musk. Before the base notes, it warms up to this kind of more ambery, labdanum-y, spicy, resinous sort of thing. But I wouldn't say it's particularly musky. Like there's musk for sure, but it's not an animalic musk in the slightest. It's not a bad fragrance. I am cognizant that I'm not really raving about very many of these fragrances except for Iris Poudre, but it's a likable fragrance and I can see why it's so popular, but it just really didn't impress me. Okay, the final two I'm not really going to talk about, but I'm just going to share a note. This one is Geranium pour Monsieur by Dominic Ropion again. And this one is just Monsieur by Bruno Jovanovic. And truth be told, I didn't try either of these. And this is something I've learned about myself through the extensive amount of sampling I've been doing lately, is I can't be bothered to try every single fragrance in every discovery set that I get. This was 12 fragrances, and for the 10 that I have talked about, I gave them all a full wearing. I would try them on paper, and then I would put them on skin. And the way I would do it is most of the time when I'm trying fragrances now, I go for a walk every morning. And so when I wake up, I get up, and before I walk the dog, I put on the fragrance. I spray on quite a lot of it generally, so I can really get a feel for it. And then I wear it for the whole day until I have to shower and go out and do something else. So generally I wear something for like 5 hours before I've given my thoughts about it and taken notes, etc. But I realized as I was going through this set, like I didn't care about Monsieur or Geranium pour Monsieur, and by the time that I was done with all the others, I was like, you know what, I'm just not gonna bother. I'm not gonna make it a marathon and make myself try stuff I don't want to try. Anyway, folks, those are my thoughts on my Frederic Malle Discovery Set. I really had fun trying all of them. I'd love to know down in the comments what your favorite Frederic Malle fragrance is, and if there's any beyond these that I should seek out and try. Until the next time, see ya.